All right, so the question of the day is, are all film distributors equal? And the answer is yes, no. We're going to explain to you actually, or share with you what makes each one of us unique. We are all based in the United States, and I'll let everyone will have an opportunity to introduce themselves. And you'll learn what makes each one of us unique, what type of films we're looking for, what some of our most successful case studies have been, and also what we have in common. And one of the reasons why I throw in are all film distributors equal, those of us sitting here at this table have one thing in common, and that is that we work very strongly and have a strong presence in the educational market, which in the United States and Canada can be a very strong revenue stream for your documentary. So with no further ado, I'm going to let everyone will introduce themselves, and we're also going to have this as more of a roundtable conversation. So as we go along, if you have a question, feel free to indicate that, and a mic will be brought over so that the Q&A won't be at the end, but dispersed throughout. So, Debbie?
Hi, I'm Debbie Zimmerman. I'm the Executive Director of Women Make Movies, which is celebrating its 40th anniversary this year. And actually we have 3 films showing here at Sheffield: Scarlet Road, Saving Face, which won the Academy Award for Best Short Documentary this year, and Kristen, help me. Oh, and Going Up the Stairs. So I hope you'll have a chance to see them. You'll get a really good idea of the kind of films that we're interested in by seeing those films. Women Make Movies is, wow, it's a little early. What is Women Make Movies? We are, we're unique in any way, shape, or form, no matter who we're with, because we have a very singular focus, and that is that we distribute films which are both by and about women. In our other programs, our production assistance program, we work with films that are directed and produced by women, but may not necessarily be on the subject of women. This is really hard because of the lights.
I know, it's so bright.
But because in distribution we really are focused on marketing, it really makes not just political sense for us to be focused on women's issues, but also marketing sense. The U.S. educational market is really a huge market, and in fact, for a lot of filmmakers, it's where they make the most amount of money. And in order to really effectively market, you need to figure out what your focus is going to be, and for us, it clearly is on women. We are what we call a full-service distributor. We're really like a boutique distributor in that we do everything, and we actually really do like to take all rights so that we can really spend time and energy marketing the films that we work with. We'll kind of start at any point in the distribution process, depending on the film. If we think that it has theatrical potential, we'll do a limited theatrical release. If we don't think that it will go into the theaters, but it's got a strong presence for festivals, we'll put it out into festivals and use festivals as a way of platforming it to the public. If not, and there are oftentimes films that don't make sense for festivals, but may be able to have a broadcast, we'll use the broadcast as a way of platforming it. But then our back end, as opposed to a lot of theatrical distributors, particularly in the US, whose back end is the consumer market, our back end is the educational market. And every film that we pick up has to be appropriate for the educational market. And I think I'll stop there.
When you say educational market, is that, what are you, college, university, library, K through 12?
Yeah, well, the educational market is actually a misnomer because when one says the educational market, it's actually everything but broadcast and cinemas and consumer. It's not just educational institutions, so it's everything from universities and colleges to libraries to prisons to government agencies, businesses, forestry services, girls' clubs or youth centers, high schools. It's really any place that you might see a film for cultural museums, for cultural, community, or educational-based programs. And that's one of the reasons why. I don't know why. I have to say that I've been doing this for 30 years now. Actually, next year will be 30 years, and I speak on distribution often and give workshops on it, and I've done workshops all over the world, and I've yet to have anybody be able to answer the question, why is it that the educational market really only exists in English-speaking countries? There's an educational market in Australia, There's certainly one in Canada. There was one in the UK until Channel 4 flooded the airways with all this fabulous programming, and for some reason there's this thing with professors here that they just, I guess it's because you pay for television, that you think you can just tape anything off the air and then bring it into the classroom and use it. But it kind of, the combination of those two things really hurt the educational market here. But there is an educational market here. We even sell films to Hong Kong, Singapore, places where English is used as in secondary schools or colleges like Japan. They teach sometimes in English. So it's really, but it is definitely something that's much more focused in English-speaking areas. And I'll just say one other thing, because I don't want to mislead you. We are interested in and really only take rights for films in North America, in Canada, the US, and Mexico. But because we're so well known all over the world, we get requests from people all over the world. So we have an agreement with our filmmakers and with a lot of the sales agents that we work with, that allows us to sell films also to universities and colleges in the educational market in other countries, which again isn't huge, but yeah. Okay.
Hi, I'm Annie Roney. I'm with Roco Films. I'm the founder of Roco Films. Roco Films is an international distribution company of documentary films. I started the company in 2000 after working for about 9 years prior to that with a company called CS Associates, where we specialized in predominantly films and series that came from U.S. public television, like Nova and Frontline. We distributed Ken Burns, all of his films, and numerous independent films as well. So that was my background prior to starting Roco Films in 2000. And the focus was and still is with our international division in finding character-driven narrative documentaries with social issues as the backdrop for international distribution. In the course of working internationally, we worked with numerous filmmakers and really sort of see ourselves as collaborators with them and getting their films seen as widely as possible. And in the process of working with so many filmmakers over those years, we'd often be asked, would you rep our film in the United States? We're based in the United States. We work with a lot of US filmmakers, although not exclusively. And consistently we said, no, we're just not ready to jump into the US market. It's a whole nother beast. At some point, we were working with some films that we loved that weren't getting picked up by sales agents in the United States. So we were just called for a few of these films that they had to be represented. We tried to get them sales agents, the people that we know and work with. And when those didn't pan out for those films, we said, well, then we're called to do this. We must do this. So at that point, we got involved in repping things in the United States. And by repping that it's still, we weren't an educational distributor at that point, but we were searching for answers for the various rights for films within the United States. So whether that be finding the right theatrical distributor or the right service deal for that film or a home video distributor, and looking for educational distributors for these films. And in the course of that, we found that there was a need for educational distributors who focused on character-driven narrative documentaries, and that worked with a small collection of films rather than a very large one. At that point, just again, sort of as working as collaborators and finding solutions to these distribution problems, we stepped in and said, well, we can help you with that. We'll do that. So about 4 years ago, we started Roco Films Educational, taking a small number of films to the US and Canadian educational market. And it's been incredibly satisfying extension of what we already do, which is when we're very passionate about films, we want to find all kinds of ways that they can be seen around the world. And now we have this opportunity in US and Canadian classrooms, which is just an extension of what we do. It's incredibly satisfying to have these kinds of films be looked at and discussed in classroom settings, as Deborah said, with nonprofits, with all kinds of organizations that you had never dreamed even existed who want to show your film, and they want to create, a screening around the film and make it something special and talk about it. This is just why we're all in the documentary business, is to, have these films seen and to have the discourse about the issues that they raise. So that's our educational division, and just quickly, we also have a third division, Roco Films Productions, which just recently partnered with 1492 Pictures, which is a feature film production company adapting documentaries into feature films. So we just announced our first film, Crime After Crime, which is very much a story-driven documentary, which will probably be released in 2013.
Hi, I'm Alice Apley, and I'm the Executive Director of Documentary Educational Resources, and we are an educational distributor based in Boston, Massachusetts. DER has been around since 1968, and our roots are in visual anthropology, but the company has broadened since then. We still, however, our focus really is on films that promote some kind of cultural, or I shouldn't say promote, but that look at, explore cultural and social phenomena that are going to be valuable in the anthropology, sociology, area studies classroom. We really look for titles that are going to move a conversation ahead, or give, that they're going to really provide some content for discussion. We, just hearing the different kinds, or the specificity, you talked about character-driven films. We're very, we'll take any kind of genre. It can be character-driven, it can be sort of an old-school narrated film, it can be observational, but as long as it has that content, that's really our main criteria. Our focus is on educational distribution. We also do festivals, and we also provide titles for the home market. I think that's it for my intro.
And I'm Elizabeth Sheldon. I'm the Vice President of Kino Lorber. Kino Lorber is an all-rights distributor based in New York. So we acquire both narrative films as well as documentaries for theatrical, educational, festival, home video, and television. The educational division, which is Kino Lorber EDU, is a very important part of our overall release strategy, especially for the documentaries. One of our current releases right now is 5 Broken Cameras. It opened at Film Forum earlier this month in June, and day and date with that theatrical release, we also announced the availability of the film to the educational market. It had already been it premiered at Sundance, so it had been on the festival circuit. Building on, we seek films that have, especially for the documentaries, natural, organic audiences. With 5 Broken Cameras, if you haven't seen it, it's a film about it's a Palestinian-Israeli co-production that looks about the encroachment of the Israelis into the Palestinian village of Belin. We have a direct relationship with we'll release this from the theatrical all the way up until we decide at some point to release it into home video. And this gets into a question of windows, which all distributors, each one of us here, manages differently. We'll talk about that next, and also what it is that distinguishes the educational market from the consumer market. So there's going to be a little technical legal overview for a moment. United States copyright law, paragraph 108, states that to protect artists and filmmakers in particular, that they may, when it's not a single home viewing, you get those FBI warnings on the front that says it's home video use only, not intended for exhibition to groups. That's in reference to this copyright law, which states that a separate fee has to be paid anytime a work of art in its entirety is shown to an audience. So public performance rights are what institutions purchase when they want to add a film to their collection and have the ability to show it numerous times to non-admission, technically non-admission paying audiences. Admission paying audiences, it's a one-time exhibition fee. So there are many, many nuances of the copyright law that we all deal with and interpret actually on a daily basis as well. generally speaking, I'm sure all of us have different price points for these public performance rights. We ask anywhere from $250 to $400. That's for one-time sale. There's also, and I'm sure it's different from distributor to distributor, so you guys can speak to your different price points. There's also, though, a face-to-face teaching exemption, and what this means is that in a classroom setting where a teacher is present, the film can be shown without public performance rights. And this is when a consumer, if it's available on the consumer market, many teachers will just go out and buy it at Amazon or Kmart for these purposes. So the educational window is oftentimes blocked out in order to protect the higher price points. So we also offer our films without PPR for an extended window until it's consumer for approximately $150 to $200. So we have a two-tier pricing model which allows us to type into this market. And you can do the math pretty quickly to figure out how many consumer videos DVDs you'd have to sell if you're doing one of them at $350 each, right? Especially if someone's buying wholesale. It's a lot. I'm not going to do the math this early in the morning. But, all of us have different pricing structures and different. Debbie's mentioned that she launches her films from either the Broadcast Festival or Theatrical. When you're launched into the educational market, is your price structuring similar?
I think it is similar. With maybe one exception, our price point is $295 for colleges and universities and public performance rights, and $95 for K through 12.
Yeah, we actually also have tiered pricing. And just to clarify something, we actually don't sell any videos because there's something called the right of first sale, that if you sell something, then the person that buys it can sell it to anybody else at any price. So we actually, I think all of us really we lease for the, or license it for the life of the product.
Yeah, that's an important distinction.
Yeah, it's another kind of weird legalese thing. But we have a tiered pricing system where we sell for $295 or $250 to universities and colleges. We then have a community-based price for K through 12 libraries and advocacy groups, and then we actually even discount further for groups like Violence Against Women, women organizations, or super advocacy groups that are using films to organize around issues, and we might go down to $49 for those. And then we also do our own consumer sales at a very low price. The difference for us is that we don't have our films out on Amazon or actually being wholesaled at a consumer price. Somebody has a question over there.
Question?
Yeah, can you just give us an example of the average revenues you might make from a title that has, let's say, the average success on the education market compared to, let's say, an average license fee?
You mean a broadcast fee? Yeah. It's, if there is no such thing as an average, that's probably the problem. Every single film is so different. Our very best-selling title is a film called Complaints of a Dutiful Daughter, which is about Alzheimer's, and it's made probably close to $700,000 in the educational market. That's, about 13 years, 10, 13 years. That's 10, actually 12 years. That's a really, really, really big selling title. Very, very few films are gonna get to that point. $150,000 to $200,000. Is about right, I would say, maybe.
Over the life of the license?
Over the life of the license, which generally, we have films. One of the things about, there's a couple of things about educational distribution that are really important for people to understand. One is that it's not a short-term thing, it's really a long-term thing. It's actually the best way to get your film to have its longest life. It should be part of a strategy. It shouldn't be the whole strategy, perhaps, but certainly part of it. The other thing is that even if you're selling many fewer copies, every one of those copies is being used multiple times for many, many, many years by institutions. We also really love the idea that it's being shown in universities and colleges, which do make up the majority of the educational market. It's being shown to people at a time in their lives when they are very open to ideas. So it's a really amazing way to actually create change. It's not going to make you a lot of money right away. It's cumulative. Generally, we have some films that have been in distribution for 30 years. We have many, many films that have been in distribution for 15 years. Some of them, just a little trickle of money. You know, it's a couple of $100s every year. Some of them, it's $4,000 to $5,000 to $10,000. You know, it's very, very different depending on what festivals the film is in, depending on what's happening in the world. You know, we had an amazing collection of films by and about Muslim women. 9/11 happened. All of a sudden, there was this demand that wasn't there before. Things go out of fashion and out of favor. Things change. There's a new discovery made about Alzheimer's, and all of a sudden a film on Alzheimer's, it becomes less relevant or more relevant.
It varies, I think, from film to film, and demand does ebb and flow depending on events in the world. There are some things that seem to be, you know, perennial favorites. We've had very strong runs with 2 films dealing with the subject of Native American history. One of them is Neil Diamond's Real Engine, which looked at the stereotypes and portrayals of Native Americans in Hollywood films. Another one is called A Good Day to Die, which is a biography of Dennis Banks, who founded the American Indian movement and really led the civil rights movements for Native American Indians. There's a dearth of these types of films on this topic, and there's a demand for them because it's such a core part of American history. Other films that we've had and those will generate, you know, $100,000 over the first 3 to 5 years in educational revenue. You know, if we also, in the case of Real Engine, could link that to a PBS broadcast on POV, and they hosted a series of community screenings across the United States so that they brought the film and it was exhibited in the communities, and then we could follow up with a sale of the public performance rights. So that was a very fruitful collaboration with other films, for instance, such as 5 Broken Cameras. It's such an important topic, and there's an audience between various festivals and the colleges and the universities that it will have a very strong life. And other films, they're steady. We have a film on Gerhard Richter, the painter, and it's, you know, it's a steady earner and will be throughout its life.
Alice had mentioned festivals too. Outside of the main room.
Alice had mentioned festivals too, and you mentioned events. And are those also, do you see revenues coming out of festival screenings and event screenings, et cetera, and that's a viable market for you?
I think I'll just interject and say that as distributors, that's our job, is to generate revenue from the festivals, the educational, and frequently, if you work with a strong distributor, the festivals know that they have to pay a fee in order to show a film. And that,
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a revenue stream. I think what's really interesting, though, is that, you know, I was just looking at our sales figures, and the film that we had that did the best out of our new releases catalog this year is a film that none of you have ever heard of, none of you will probably ever hear of. It's not a film that has screened in any festival. It's a film called Rights and Wrongs, and it's about women, and actually it's the history of Islam, looking at it from a feminist perspective. Of course, it's a subject that's very much of interest. So, you know, on the other hand, a film that is in festivals is going to have a much higher profile and will enable a film that doesn't have much of a market to actually be sold. So, for example, you know, what I say is that a film either has to be really needed or it has to be really good for it to sell. You can have a film that's not very well made on a subject that's really needed, and it's going to do really well. You know, we have a film by Kim Longinata, which I'm sure all of you know, called Sisters-in-Law. You know, it's a film about 2 women judges in the Cameroon. Who cares about 2 women judges in the Cameroon? Not a hell of a lot of people. But it's such a fantastic film that it's done amazingly well in distribution. Her new film, Pink Saris, same thing. People don't really care all that much about women in India. On the other hand, you know, again, we have films that are kind of much less, not feature length, they're hour long, they're 40 minutes, they're just kind of, you know, well made but not terribly interesting in terms of form, and those films are going to do really well based on their subject.
Yeah, I'd like to jump in and say that our most successful title released in this year is called Misrepresentation, and it's an example of a film that really just struck a nerve with, as a film about the objectification of women in media and how that results in less women in positions of power and government. And it just hit at the right time, and it's also a very well-made documentary, and it's one that's probably sits right now at about, in the first 9 months, about $500,000 in revenue, and that excludes. We work with the filmmaker with sort of what they want to do also, because sometimes filmmakers want to do certain things themselves. So in this case, they wanted to do all non-governmental, non-profit screenings. So that $500,000 figure is strictly for educational institutions, from screenings to library purchases to high schools. And I think, not only did it just strike a nerve, one of the other things that I'm sure we can all talk about is what the whole educational package has to offer, which is there's the film on the DVD, but then there's a high school module, there's a middle school module, there's even a K through second grade module, and each one of those has an accompanying curriculum that goes with it. So even though the home video has now come out, there's still robust sales in the educational market, because what this package offers you can't get from Amazon if you went to buy it off of Amazon, because it doesn't have these modules, it doesn't have the corresponding curriculum. So, sometimes the film is really set apart by all the things it can offer to an educator. Sometimes we'll have the long version, which is the film as it was seen in festivals, and we'll have a 1-hour version. Often professors, teachers, don't have the time to show a full feature-length version. So when the educational package has more to offer than just the home video, it will have a longer life necessarily. Also with just another example of the kinds of things that we can do with misrepresentation, for example, there was so much energy around that film, particularly in California, where so much of media is made, and an effort to have the film shown in California schools, and in particular California public schools, don't often have the resources to, they don't have the budget for media. A group of people in my area sort of band together, did 3 separate screenings and raised $50,000 to make sure that at least 500 California public schools can have this film in its curriculum at no charge. So there's a lot of different ways into the educational market, which, as Deborah said, is really vast.
How long did you keep it out of the, when did it get released in home video?
So it got released in home video, I think, like February 10th, and we started the distribution, the educational distribution officially around September before.
So a year and a half, or
No,
6 months?
6 months.
Wow,
Yeah.
that's amazing.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
I think it is a special case. It's definitely the exception, not the rule. But I think also it's a matter of really finding the kinds of audiences for each one of those films.
I think that's really important, as what you're saying, is to be able to connect with these audiences that are oftentimes at universities and colleges where these topics are being discussed and they're active and relevant. And if a filmmaker brings along an audience that they've built from day one by either an Indiegogo or a Kickstarter campaign, and they have that base that can really get out there, it makes a very big difference in your overall sales potential.
I have a question. Hello? Okay, so a successful film does $100,000 or $200,000. How much of that do we see, each of you?
30%.
So you're 30,
50.
you're 50,
30.
and how much are you?
Between 30 and 50.
Okay.
Actually, I should
Yeah.
say that it's 30 or 40, depending on the contract.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we can see $40,000 from the $100,000.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yep.
Exactly. And you don't have to do any of the work.
You just have to make the film.
Yeah, I mean, this is, a lot of, you have to make the film, that's true. You have to make the film, but a lot of filmmakers talk about doing distribution themselves. I think it's a fantastic thing. I think nobody is ever gonna care more about your film than you do, without a doubt. I mean, we feel like we're adoptive parents. We really, work in close collaboration with our filmmakers and treat their films like we've adopted them. But at the same time, they're still your babies. On the other hand, you may want to go off and make another film as opposed to spending the time. Yeah.
As an adopted parent,
Yeah.
literally, and a distributor, filmmakers know how to make films. They don't know how to distribute. They can't know. Why would they want to know how to distribute?
Listen, I'm a distributor. I feel that way.
I think it's...
I bet.
And you've got the connections. When Deborah Zimmerman rings someone, the call gets taken. When, hopefully,
The media librarians don't care that Deborah Zimmerman is calling them. Believe me, I can promise you that. And the educational market doesn't work that way at all, but thank you very much for saying so. I appreciate that, and it is true that if we come on board with a filmmaker, I feel like there are three things that filmmakers can get out of distribution, and only one of them is money, and that's fame, fortune, and a good conscience, And you have to decide as a filmmaker what it is that you're really looking for. Nobody's going to get really rich, and this really isn't a business where it's about even making back the cost of the film. That's just the reality. Peter Wintonic said yesterday in his remarks, that in the future, documentary filmmakers won't have to starve. Well, I really hope so. But the reality is that if you're in this to make money, you're in the wrong business.
I think Peter Wintonic's never going to starve.
Oh. Okay, two, good conscience. It's about getting your film out to an audience that really needs to see it. And sometimes that's the most important thing. And the third is fame. And that's about building your reputation as a filmmaker so that you can actually go off and make other films, get contracts, get commissions. And that's where having a distributor who has a name really helps you, because just by picking up the film, it really helps. Being able to get your film sold to television definitely helps when somebody will pick up the phone. Educational distribution, it doesn't matter at all. It really doesn't. What you need is a distributor that is going to be consistently marketing your film in every way possible, whether it's through a catalog, whether it's through postcards, whether it's through, now it's almost all online, emails, posting to listservs, getting it reviewed in blogs, being at conferences, getting your film into really obscure journals that none of you read, but media librarians read.
But it's also, it is a partnership. I like to joke that I feel like I run the Romanian orphanage rather than the adoptive parents, but I suppose the result is the same. But it is a partnership, and you want, when you work with a distributor, your distributor does have expectations regarding your involvement to help to locate, to identify, and to reach out to your audience. And a lot of times, there will be a need for the filmmaker with specific films for, the college or university will want to do a screening. They'll want the filmmaker there for a Q&A. The distributor provides the backbone and the pipeline. Your involvement, though, is what's going to drive it to success.
Just to follow up to this, the question of the work, it seems like there would be thousands of institutions. Are you dealing with sub-organizations that are coordinating this, or are you dealing individually with every single institution? Just want to get a sense of the logistics and work involved in managing this large body of institutions.
Well, we can target certain sections of the institutions. For instance, if a film has appeal to a particular kind of professors or particular kind of classes, then we can target those in a mailing campaign of some sort. I think in general, for us, we have a strong reputation that cuts across institutions, so institutions know to, check. I know that we have, library acquisition folks or faculty who will just regularly check our website to see what the new titles are as part of their purchasing.
For us, it's one of the reasons we really want to stay small and not take on many films each year, because we do want to kind of target with each film different institutions that might not be, are probably going to be different than institutions that are going to work for Film B. But I think probably for all of us, I'll say it's a collaboration with filmmakers who generally know know the groups that they're connected with from the day one of making their film. And so working in close collaboration with them brings you to all kinds of organizations, like I said, that sometimes you would have never dreamed exist. You didn't know that there's 50 chapters of this organizations across college campuses, for example. They kind of come out of the woodwork. But also, I think working closely with the filmmakers also allows you to have conversations about how their website is set up to send people, correctly to the rights holders for their film, and that can be a big part of right from the get-go, distinguishing, where people go for what kind of rights. And the more upfront and clear the filmmakers can be on their website and that we can be on ours, it really directs people to the right place so they understand where to go for a public screening or a theatrical booking, or who they should contact for festivals, who they contact if they're a high school teacher. So that's a really big part of getting the film to the right people.
There are something called jobbers. We call them jobbers. They're wholesalers that actually more and more universities, or maybe not more and more, but there's a certain percentage of universities that will only work through these wholesalers. And so we sell to them and they sell to the universities. And sometimes we will work with sub-distributors who have special area focus. Like, for example, there's a distributor. Another thing about the educational distribution field is that it's very, very subject-oriented. There are distributors that focus on very particular issues, like, for example, Bullfrog Film focuses on environmental films and films for kids. California Newsreel focuses on, well, they used to focus on labor, African American, and an Africa collection. There's a distributor named Terra Nova that deals just with films for on older people and older issues, and we sub-distributed Complaints of a Dutiful Daughter through them. There are others that just focus on health. So you really need to, if you want to know if your film is going to have a market in the U.S. educational market, you need to think about what course, what class, what course in university would your film be used in. And if you can come up with one or two, and preferably three, then your film's probably going to have a market. If it has one, it will. If it has more than one, considerably more than one, it'll do really well.
I agree with that and would push it even further, not even what course, but what discussion within that course is this really going to move ahead? What real content is this going to deliver, or issues is this going to expose that is going to be the basis for discussion?
And then match that with the appropriate distributor, because as we pointed out earlier, we each have unique areas of strength based on subject.
Hi, yes. I just wanted to know, typically, how early do you like to hear from filmmakers in the making of their film? I mean, does it depend on the project or each of your... and just another sub-question on top of that. We hear a lot about outreach and that kind of outreach strategy. Is that something you build with the filmmaker, or do you want them to come to you with a very solid strategy there, or that kind of thing?
Well, I'll say that we actually increasingly want to get involved earlier and earlier. We also have a production assistance program, and in the production assistance program, we work with women filmmakers trying to help them raise their money. They actually do the fundraising, but we offer them support. We'll review proposals and budgets and make suggestions of funders. We're just launching an international component. It's only been open to American women filmmakers for the last 15 years. But you can talk to me about that if you're interested, and come to the panel that I'm moderating tomorrow and producing, because we're going to be talking about that tomorrow. But we will look at educational distributors. Are also, the great thing about them is that they're much more open to talking to filmmakers. They'll give you a letter of support, for example. In the US, you really need to be able to show that there's distribution interest in your film. So we'll look at your idea and we'll write you a letter and say, yeah, we think that we have a market for that and we'd like to see it when it's finished. We'll look at a rough cut if we think that it's really appropriate for us. We also will work with filmmakers, like, as I mentioned, we've been working with Kim Longranato for a long time. We talk about festival strategy while she's still making the film. So we like to get in very early so that we can help craft the very best festival strategy. On the other hand, some filmmakers go out and do everything that they want to do with festivals and then come to us, and we'll pick them up then.
We come to festivals looking for films. So I'm looking for finished films, and we, on the other hand, don't get involved at an earlier stage.
The same is true for us. I like to hear about films early on, but to make a commitment for us, it's very much a visceral reaction to the experience of watching at least a rough cut. So we come in later.
Yeah, we're sort of split between the two models. We also have a fiscal sponsorship program, though very few of the films that go through our fiscal sponsorship end up in our collection. And generally, we will review, but we will also review a film. If the content is really appropriate, I'm happy to look at a rough cut, or someone can look at a rough cut and give some suggestions about tailoring it for the educational market. Sometimes we'll see a film that's been released for festivals, that has done well in festivals, but it's a bit long for the classroom, and we might suggest cutting a 60-minute version or a shorter version even. Though most, I would say most of our films come to us as finished.
So question over here.
Sorry. I'm from Canada, and my films have done reasonably well in the education market, but all I'm hearing of late is cutbacks to the education system, and one of the things that's constantly being cut are the resources that teachers get in the classroom, and they've always said that they value documentaries, and they're not able to get their hands on them. The other thing is that teachers want the documentaries, but then there are gatekeepers, people who actually acquire them, and there's a whole bureaucratic system in terms of, I'm just wondering if that's your experience in the States as well, or how do you overcome that if, and do you sell in Canada?
I think that budgets are being cut, certainly the state level. But some of that money, and this is something that we can also touch on, is some of the money is being reallocated, or there are different sources for digital. And so another growing frontier for a revenue stream to the educational market is in the digital, what we call digital site licensing. And what that means is that a school can host a digital copy of the film on their local server that can be accessed by the whole entire community. There's a lot of legal discussion around this topic, which I won't go into all the gory detail about, but I'm not sure all of us are we offer digital site licenses, and what we charge $499 for a digital site license for one license to a single institution. It's not pay-per-view. No, it's not a pay-per-view. So they host it and they stream it. In fact, they encode it. So, and then our license is for the life of the digital file. We also offer a dual package with both public performance rights, so they could exhibit as well, for close to $600. And this has been, the schools, it's a new area for both us as distributors and also for the schools, but it's a growing area of revenue. And I'm not sure what efforts are being made on this front with my colleagues here. It's something that we've certainly cultivated.
I was actually going to talk more about the budget cuts. This is really fascinating to me because there definitely are budget cuts across the board. But what's so bizarre is that we code our sales LC or VS, going back to the days of video sales and low-cost sales. Low-cost sales are those for under $100. The low-cost sales have gone down. The full-price sales have increased. So I don't understand. We do a lot of discounting to make sure that teachers are able to afford the films. We do constant special offers, five films for $4.95, so they're getting each film for under $100. Buy this new film, get 2 on the same subject for 50% off. Again, addressing the fact that budgets are being cut. But it seems to me that if people want to use something, there is money for them to buy it.
Well, I think it's also important to distinguish. I'm curious what you have to say about this, Deborah. That the high school, the K through 12 market is very different from the college and university, which from
Yeah.
what we can tell, that's been pretty steady, the college and university, and those are pretty easily identifiable gatekeepers, if you will. It's what's really challenging are high schools, where there is not an identifiable media buyer at high schools, certainly not at schools that are struggling. So that's, I'm not sure if that's, your film is more directed towards high schools, but those are harder to reach, and the price points are lower. So
I think they're harder also because the curriculum demands, at least in the U.S., are so stringent. And so for a teacher to be willing to take on a film or to fight to have a film accessible, they need to know exactly how they're going to be able to use it with a lot of packaging around it to make it very usable.
And it's not a universal curriculum, because it's not very specific. I mean, they can't get something that's so specific to their lesson plan and those needs, because
I think the trick is to take the film and figure out how it fits into the national standards in this country, or at least in the U.S. So, you can't address the entire curriculum, but you can address how this little piece, the film is going to fill some little piece of it. Yeah. I also wanted to say about the digital streaming, we also do 1, 2, and 3-year licenses, either along with the DVD sale, and that's for internal streaming through a Blackboard system or something. And then I think we're probably the only ones here. We also work with a sub-distributor that provides licenses to access an entire collection of our films online. And I think this is something that, it's still relatively new. We're seeing where this is going to go, but it is a new model that at least some distributors are testing, and that is this idea of leasing an entire collection of titles, which I think
Who are you working with?
With Alexander Street.
With Alexander, and
Yeah.
Has that affected your educational sales?
It's very hard to see. Not
How long
as
have
far
you
as we
been-
can tell.
How long
And,
have you been doing it?
2 years?
2 years with Alexander Street?
Yes.
Interesting.
And
So for
we
those who
actually
don't know,
have
just
universities
maybe-
who do both. They still buy the DVD. Because also the Alexander Street platform is really optimized for students studying a title. It's not optimized for, screening on a large screen just because of their own bandwidth issues. So I think you have universities who are looking for students to be able to review a film that's being studied or watch it in small groups as opposed to in classrooms. So some still want the DVD.
interesting.
Or what I hear also is they still want the DVD because certain universities, their collection is important to them, how many titles they have.
They use the DVD for archival purposes.
Yeah.
Well, with Alexander Street Press, their current model is that they create curriculum collections, and then the films go into a curriculum collection. So, for instance, many Kino Lorber films are in their film studies collection, which can then be streamed.
But isn't it also a database? I mean, it's really...
Yes.
It's really used,
Very
and what
rich.
we're hearing more and more is that, I hate to say this, films are not being seen in their entirety. Clips are being used, just increasingly. So a collection like Alexander Street Press, what they do is they actually create a database of all of the information that's in your film so that people can subject search and pull out a piece that's on, American Indians in film, on one particular person. They'll find, what's in this film, that film, this other film. It's really interesting.
Just
Very
coming back
different
to a point that you made earlier about packaging the film for the educational market, looking at the curriculum and any extra materials that you've got with a DVD or study guides. I wondered if you could give me the kind of top list of what you'd be looking for, because I'm in the process of finishing this film. It's all about celebrating science and exploration. I've been talking to educators in the UK, and I've actually got an international sponsor on board to pay for this. But what I need to do is deliver them a business plan so I can spend their money wisely.
Yep.
Well, with misrepresentation, when I was talking about, that's really a robust, excellent package of materials. The filmmaker formed an advisory council of educators to help illuminate certain pieces of the film that would be most likely used in a classroom for this age or this age, and that would also fit into the standards that are set, which is Alice was referring to earlier. And I mean, you could probably speak more to this because you've also been in the classroom teaching with films.
Well, I've taught at the university level, and for that, well, let me jump back. Let me think. We have a lot of study guides online that you can look at, and they vary from ones that have maybe an introductory essay with some background content to, they can have one or all of these components. Content information, discussion, questions, suggestions for specific issues or topics to discuss, and suggestions for specific scenes to show. And it just depends. I definitely agree, working with an advisory committee, if you have it sounds like you're working with a lot of scientists, people who would know, both the scientists and the educators, and find what the kind of what they come together with as the key issues to include. Anything that can provide the background for, especially if it's K through 12, providing the background so somebody doesn't have to go and do some research themselves to go and figure out what it's about. For teaching in the university, I think it was very different. I always showed whole films. No, I didn't always show whole films. But what I would want in that case might be background about the filmmaker, also about the film, the content, the place, or very specifically about the context in which the film was made, because that will provide some insight on why this representation of people and place at this time and moment in this form, which was always helpful for me for teaching.
One of the things that I think is really exciting for the future is this idea of versioning, and versioning your film for different markets. And Annie really spoke about that a little bit in terms of all of the different ways that you can package what it is that you're doing. We have a film called Sin by Silence, which is about domestic violence. And this also goes back to the second part of your question on outreach. We are distributors, and we really can't do that kind of on-the-ground outreach that outside groups do, and filmmakers contract with other people to do it, but we really want to work alongside of it and collaborate with them. And this was an example of a really great collaboration. It's a film about domestic violence, and they created a DVD with all of these modules. And what they did was they used outtakes. And so, for example, they have a module that's just on family court. They have another module that's on law, another module that's on emergency room. So it's like all of these different issues related to the issue in the film, which is overall domestic violence. So it can be used by so many different people. We were able to do a broadcast on ID, investigative discovery, and we worked alongside of them with the filmmakers, and the film has been a really amazing success. So I just want to encourage all of you to really think about your films, make a festival version, do whatever you want with the festival version, then think about creating an educational version that could be very different, and that then you can actually pretty much have your cake and eat it too.
Is that a matter of recutting, or is it a matter of providing
Could be either. It could be any one of the above. It can be a shorter version. It can be the same version with additional information on the DVD. It can be chaptering it in a certain way. Yeah.
It's also your opportunity to, what would you, it's your film, how do you want to give it to educators to use? So, you get to decide. There's not a formula for it, but based on what you've already made, your film already exists. What do you want to pull? What do you want to highlight? And then this is a tool that you're giving to teachers.
See, what Annie said before is really important. I really love the way that you said it. We need something that will continue, I don't know how you said it, but continue to make people buy it at a high price when it's out for a low price. So it has to be something of value that I'm offering to get people to continue to pay $295 when it's available for $14.95. So right now our strategy is don't offer it for $14.95 because we can't continue selling it for $2.95. It really cuts into our sales terribly. We want you to be able to have consumers see the film. But when we crunch the numbers, and by the way, you know, if we see a film where we think that the consumer market is much greater than the educational market, we'll say, go for it. Go to the consumer market. It's not right for us. You can have better luck and make more money in the consumer market. Music films, for example, don't really have a great, for us, have not been really great in the educational market. But I'm still struggling to try to figure out how we can all, how the films can maximize their potential and sell to as many different markets as possible. And that is really one way of doing it.
And not to contradict Debbie, but our experience has been that we sell films with PPR, even out, continue to sell them, although it does decrease even after the consumer release. And most of the films that we acquire, at some point, we do plan on releasing them to the consumer market. But we find that the higher price point sales, we drop the price then down to $149, so there's already an automatic reduction in the amount of revenue. But because it's the license that is being purchased, which allows the use of this in a public context for screening, the sales will continue, but they will be decreased.
Sort of answering my question, I was going to ask how you're aligning the commercial exploitation of a film, commercial sales, with the educational sales. Does this mean that the educational market is you're going to them very early or even
very
first?
Early. So with us, it's day and date with the theatrical release. So when we release a film in New York, when we open it, that same day, we announce its availability with public performance rights or digital site licenses to the educational, and then through the theatrical festival window, as long as that can last, and that can sometimes be 6 months, sometimes for some films, like with Real Engine, it was over 2 years before we released it into home video, because we knew that the home video sales would never compensate for the revenue that we had earned, during that 2-year period.
Well, then how, in terms of this sort of utopian ideal of how web streaming and digital distribution will work, everything will be available online in some form or another. Will this gut the educational market, or do you still see that being
So
there?
far, we have films that are on iTunes, and the streaming does not seem to compete. It's
Yeah.
interesting. They're being used in very, very different ways, whereas the download, I think, would. But the honest to God truth, nobody knows what's going to happen in the next 5 to 10 years. I can tell you that what I know from having gone through 3 to 4 format changes in my life. I mean, I started doing this when it was 16 millimeter, before there was video, is the more things change, the more they stay the same. That no matter what format it is that people are seeing films in, it's all about marketing. I can tell you that. I can also tell you that institutions take a lot longer to take on new formats. So, we still have people converting from VHS to DVD for university use, okay? And we also do digital site licensing, as Elizabeth does, and increasingly people do want to buy encoded copies, but they also still want the DVDs. So we're in a period of tremendous, tremendous transition.
But what isn't changing, at least currently, is the copyright law, which still says that you can't take, something that you bought from iTunes and show it to a group of people. So with colleges and universities who tend to respect copyright, because this is what they do, they write, they want their copyright respected. So, that part's not going to change. And that is a big piece of the educational component, is showing films in a group setting.
Yeah. On one of our films, we actually offer downloads direct from our site, and it's a film on Heidegger. And we had a professor purchase the download and then come back, $15. He watched it essentially as a preview. And then he came back to us and he said, I'd like to show this in a classroom. What license do I need to purchase? We sold him the film for $249 minus the $15 for the download. It worked quite nicely. We could do an upsale. So.
Yeah, I was going to say, when you were talking about releasing the home video or the educational at the same time as the theatrical or festivals, all of those act as promotion for the sales.
Yeah.
Either people have seen it and they think, oh, I need this for the classroom, or word gets around, or somebody didn't get to see it, but they hear it's good, and so that will push sales. So to have it available immediately before it drops out of mind, I think is very helpful. Not that we always get them at the same time, but it's helpful.
Deborah said that music films tend to not do well. I wanted to ask the others, is this also your experience?
Yes.
We have some ethnomusicology films that do well, but they are very, focused on documenting and exploring particular cultures and music as opposed to music films, if that's a distinction.
Yeah, we have no experience with music films, so I can't answer. Sorry.
It's really about entertainment. It's not just music. It's if the purpose of a film is to entertain, it's going to have a better market than the educational market. It makes sense.
And Discovery?
Discovery?
What do you mean?
Discovery. I mean, like adventure-style documentaries. It's also probably the same, no?
For me, if it has the content that can be used in the classroom, that's the criteria. Again, any sort of genre or narrative could potentially work, but it needs to have, one of the things that we look for with films and filmmakers is what kind of a relationship with the people that are that are depicted in the film did the filmmaker have? Is there a long-standing relationship? Do they really know the people and the circumstances of their lives, or are they passing through, which not always, but it might be very entertaining, but it may not have the content that we're looking for, or that the people that we're selling the rights to are looking for.
Have you seen the movie Yesterday? Yesterday, the opening movie, Searching for Sugar Man?
No.
I've seen it.
Okay, so because some of us have seen it, would this work in the classroom or not?
Well, I'd love to jump in because we're very small, very boutique, but we are different in that way because we are looking for the narrative, cinematic documentary. And yes, those might not play as well for certain kinds of classrooms and professors, but a big component of the educational market is the public screenings on campuses, which can be led by student union groups, which can be led by a variety of different kinds of nonprofits who might want to show it on a campus or elsewhere. So I actually think, though there might not be a huge market for that film, I think that absolutely that students might want to see that on their campuses as part of their campus experience. Our tagline is entertain an idea. So we very much are looking for films that do entertain and inspire and get people thinking. So it can be a large range of subjects, really.
Again, remember what I said about if it's a really good film, then you make people want it. The kinds of films that Annie has are generally films, she's very lucky, that win awards, that are in festivals, that have this kind of reputation, and people want to see them. Yeah.
Hi, I'm wondering about the production of a DVD for the educational market. If you all prefer to work with filmmakers to develop those DVDs and repackage the content, or do you prefer for the filmmaker to already have the educational materials already created, the DVD already produced, and so which way would you prefer, or do you prefer? Is it different depending upon the situation?
The answer from my point is we work with filmmakers who have both finished material where we can take the master and we can add our logos and then we can move forward, or with someone who delivers just an HD cam or a Beta SP. So it varies.
I think in terms of producing the DVD, some of the most basic things are what matters most to me is that you have some really good still photography. Whether you've already developed that into a cover and we can work with some of the design ideas, it may or may not fit our branding, or we may need to tweak it. Our covers vary quite a bit, so it's not like we're conforming everything to look exactly the same. But the most important thing is making sure there's some good material to work with. I think with developing the materials, the content, there's a lot of different content areas that we work with, so we're looking for the filmmaker to have at least some connections with the content area. Hopefully, after however many years making a film, you've already spoken to some people, have some advisors on board who can help with that, but we can also provide assistance. So it just varies.
I just want to stress what Alice just said about photos, because if you remember nothing else from the panel today, remember that. You know, it's the single most important thing that we have to work with in selling your film. You know, besides the trailer on YouTube or on Vimeo, what's going to attract people is the image. You know, they look through a catalog, they see a photo, they go online, they see a photo, you get a postcard, you see a photo, and I cannot tell you how awful the photos are that we get. People think that you could take stills off of the film. It doesn't work all the time. Get a good photographer to come and take some photos. Barter your skills. Pay a photographer. They know what they're doing. That's why they're photographers. You know, not everybody that can pick up a camera actually is a photographer. And get really emotional, heartfelt, action photos. We've got so many photos of, you know, headshots like that. It's just frustrating. It's really difficult. And also, I would say good artwork is important. It's really nice when we have somebody that comes to us with a really good logo for the film. Tagline, great. I mean, we'll come up with one if you don't have one. And sometimes we'll look at your artwork and say, we're not crazy about it. We think that we can do better. And we will, sometimes.
What's your relationship with sales agents?
Oh, we hate them. No. No, I'm joking, totally. We buy them. Annie's a sales agent, that's why I said that. First of all, does everybody understand the difference between distributors and sales agents? Because people always get them confused. This is the way that I personally describe it. To me, a distributor is somebody who actually sells to people who are end users. Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. And sales agents sell to distributors and broadcasters. So we buy films from sales agents, and we work with them very closely, and we have great relationships with them. Katrine Leclay from Doc & Co. We have Scarlet Road is one of the films that we have here, and she's distributing that internationally. We're distributing it in North America. We work very closely with them.
I think it can be helpful to work with a sales agent because they may have strengths in distribution that we don't have, and I think there's a cumulative effect there if a film's being leveraged in different ways.
They also have general professional knowledge which can help to negotiate the agreement, and some sales agents have excellent reputations, so you pay close attention to them when they recommend a film, so it can really benefit a filmmaker.
Just a very quick question. If we're looking at an average film in a year, how many institutions would you sell that to? I'm just trying to get an appreciation of audience, really. So I need to go back to the sponsor to say how far this would go.
It's just so hard. I mean, again, there's no such thing as an average film. They're really all so different.
Give me both ends of the spectrum then, the worst and the best.
The worst is... No, I mean, I wouldn't say the worst is one because, you know, in the first year, 500 to 1,000 institutions. I mean, that's just pulling it out of the, I guess. It's, again,
it varies
just
so much
it's
from
so hard.
film. For us, we have a specialty in arts. So we've had the documentary, The Woodmans, on Francesca Woodman. We have the Gerhard Richter documentary. So we have good relationships with art history departments. On the other hand, you know, we are not a specialist in women's studies. So, you know, it would depend on any number of factors. How many there, I mean, and yeah.
My question is, how do you select the films? If you go mainly through festivals and sales agents, or you work also with single producers, do you really see everything you have at your desks?
What was the last
Do you have
question?
how many films you take per year?
That's, you don't want to see my iPad.
I would say first, we get a lot of submissions over the internet, and we try and screen the submissions we get to see if the content is even vaguely related to where our strengths are. So that's the first cut. So we do not see a lot of those films that are just pitched to us over the internet. Of the ones that come come in-house, that we ask for screeners, somebody will watch at least part of it. It's possible that a lot don't get seen the entire film. What we're really looking for is the content. Again, I keep saying this. And we'll do a mix of finding things at festivals or hearing about a film and having submissions. I don't know what the breakdown is. Or having filmmakers that we've worked with in the past come back to us with a film.
We find it probably most of our films at film festivals, and there's a lot to be said for relationships in this business. There's a film playing here that's one of ours called We Are Legion, which I wouldn't have heard about had the publicist not said, you really should talk to Roco Films, and they contacted us, and that was the publicist. On the other hand, we also pride ourselves on answering our phones. So, some of our very best, and I'm speaking internationally and also educational sales, have come from first-time filmmakers who we wouldn't know anything about them had we not just picked up the phone. And a lot, believe it or not, there's a lot you can tell by just a conversation on the phone with a filmmaker, because you're going to be working together for a number of years. And that connection is so important, because it tells you something about not only what that relationship might be like going forward, but what is the sensibility about the person you're speaking to will say a lot about the film. Usually if you love the film, you probably are going to love the filmmaker with documentaries, because you invest so much of your heart into them that they kind of go hand in hand.
20% of the film, estimate, 20% of the films that we acquire are from filmmakers who we've worked with before. Another 20% are films that kind of what we call come over the transom, or films that just people send to us, like that film Rights and Wrongs that I mentioned. As Annie said, first-time filmmaker. And then another 40% are films that are recommended to us, or that we see in festivals, and I think that's 80%. And then the other 20%, I have no idea. But we do, actually the way that it works at Web and Make Movies is we screen every film that comes to us. If it's by a woman and about women, we have a committee of our staff, and it's just kind of for fun. I'll just tell you how it goes. So if one person sees it and says a resounding no, that's kind of it. If it's a maybe, and they're very it's very hard for somebody to get a no, then another person will see it. If another person says yes, then there'll probably be a group screening. Myself, Kristen Fitzpatrick, who's here with me at Sheffield, who does acquisitions for us, and both of us are at festivals kind of all year long, or Julie, who's our distribution manager. One of the three of us will always see one of the maybes, and that's kind of how it. And then we have to get a kind of full feeling yes from the staff, because they're the ones that are selling the film, and they have to really believe in the film. So it takes us a long time, but we also don't pick up very many films, because we really, it is very much a long-term commitment to that film, and we want to make sure that, and sometimes we'll send your film out to experts in the field, to academics, and we want to know, is this something that you can really use? So it's a long process.
We probably acquire more films than any of my other colleagues here at this table, because we're releasing 2 films a month theatrically. So that gets you up to 24 films. And half of those, maybe 70% of those, are feature films. However, our documentaries tend to do very, very well, the ones that we select for theatrical release. When we acquire a film, we ask ourselves, can we release it theatrically? If it's a no, then it sort of becomes a minor acquisition. And that's not to say that we wouldn't pick that film up because we think it has a television broadcast life coupled with the educational and eventually the home video, but when we acquire the top, 24 films, because we have an output deal with Netflix, the theatrical is very important because it triggers our licensing fee. And so then the windows become, we can trace it from the theatrical all the way down to its last, the digital release, which is day and date for us with the DVD. Most of our films, I would say 30 to 40% either come from recommendations of filmmakers or sales agents. I would say 30% are things that we pick up at festivals. There's a team of us that travels to various festivals, be it Tribeca, Sundance, Toronto, Sheffield, IDFA. And then we have the submissions that come in over the transom, as you say. But everything is, we keep a log, and everything is watched by at least one person, if not more. So.
And by the way, we oftentimes find films not in the festival program, but in the docs for sale or in Videotheque. Because we're not just looking for the kind of big feature documentaries. We're also looking for, very specific subject kind of films.
Last year at El Bulli, there was a film at IDFA called El Bulli that we acquired, and that was our hit for the year. And we found that at the Videotheque in Amsterdam.
It wasn't in the festival.
It wasn't in the festival.
That's
maybe.
I think it was.
But I saw it at the Videotheque anyways.
Yeah, well, none of us ever go into a theater. We're always when I used to do acquisitions, that's all I did was I would just stay in the Videotheque the whole time.
That's why we're so pale.
Yeah.
I think it's a wrap.
We actually,
We did it.
We answered everybody's questions.
Your last chance.
Going once, going twice.